Yeah, so let me get you this.
Right, no, actually, third. We have got a.
So, the letter is that letter that just kind of acknowledges that this is not a binding agreement. The name. It's eight questions, and then it's based off of the grant. There's a rubric of how are scored. So that way we have to apply for an easement. Basically, the rubric or whoever has. So these questions were basically back with things like, are you interested in an easement on like all of your land or just partial? What agricultural purpose? Pasture? How long is what it gets aimed at? Where is it in that? And then also what describes the interest. So things like I'm a new farmer. My farm is located on prime forest, facing fresh development. These are all questions. That way, people on file and people that also separate government applications put out, they'll be like just be notified. Or we read it out.
I'm glad that this task force that suggested that we set up some educational sessions in different areas of the county, just to answer questions about what is farmland preservation, how it works, that sort of thing, because it's very involved and there's a lot of people who don't understand it. So we're in the process of trying to determine where and all of those should take place. Led by
For my big PowerPoint, I
AER, third road, that's, on the, with the water pump up there.
you qualify.
I got you quick.
They've already qualified for land use.
So, jump in. Gretchen is not based on the acreage. She doesn't qualify for. She does meet the other requirement that you have.
Okay.
I make a motion that we vote these 3 parcels in.
That's
Want to flip back to the first page there, this is their standard update, the parcels, so we vote, parcels, top of, 3 parcels, landowner, total acres, profit, program, 11,000. Kind of approximated one more.
That's how many acres.
work on. Question, that question for the next question, right?
So we're third.
Some wouldn't qualify because of the acreage amounts, right?
Yeah, so if they don't qualify, especially like, so one of the qualifications that the PMP, that has an acreage requirement, it's not all farms here do meet that, so probably about 10 years now, the ag board made, kind of a separate ruling, to kind of include some of those smaller farms that is, engaged in agriculture, by general statute 106, and qualified bona fide farm under North Carolina general statute. And then that includes like farm sales tax exemption, property tax. Just surveying present use value to be choose not to, your schedule F. And there are some other things.
That's
Not have any this time. We'll say that, but,
lady numbers, we have, let's see that pretty quickly.
Well, it was my goal to get done by 12:45, so we could discuss the public hearing, but we did kind of want to do that real quick. So if there's any other ag updates anyone wants to share, or wants to share.
Sure, I can just do an update on some upcoming meetings and conferences. It's that time of year, so Glitter Apple School for Stepwood Ridge Community College will be February 3rd and 4th. We have our Neighborhood Association conference and trade show, and that's in Asheville, Dixon Plaza. That's going to be the 25th and 26th of February. There's website, a lot of site credit. Have a great workshop on the 13th of March. And also the North Carolina Caneberry Association. I help run that. That's going to be March 5th. So a lot of meetings and a lot of grower conferences. Just reach out to me or check our website. We have it all on there.
Just the only kind of side note on the Hurricane Recovery Act. Part of agriculture, they are still some ongoing programs under it that we'll be sending out some more money to grow. There was, increase in percentage on tree loss for your economic growth. I think it affected like 80 or 90 growers. Helping him this one said there would be some more help for some row crop roll. Yeah. See, so some more help. They're doing all they can. Then there's still another phase that's coming. This down the road just a little bit, and this is the CP part that was not. It's not true ECP because it's not covered under the federal definition of ECP, but it's going to be roads, culverts, some creek bank repair that you did get turned in or did get or actually discovered after the application date for it had happened. That happened to me. One we left a nice little lost the word, but barrier between the creek and the orchard. So it's blackberry briars and things like that. When we got in there looking, it had washed out from under those, and you didn't see that. And we went and repaired that, but that repaired out of pocket without CP help, and that is where they're looking at maybe making some help for that. But this will be a separate application and will require receipts. It's not going to be the other one where they have your RMA data or something already down in that data. They don't have this data. This would be something that you will have to fill the form out and provide receipts for that. Their target date, I think, on that was March, but with the legislature, I don't know. So it should be covered. Again, it's one of those things when you get it and you got it till you do. It's a proposal at this point. Does anybody got anything else they would like to discuss? Any comments?
Well, I know everybody's interested in new ag building, and the architects are continuing to work on that, but are limited in what they do until we determine the location. So it's kind of at a standstill, but we can't plan much until we have the funding from the state, and until they pass budget, we won't have that. So it's a domino. It's waiting on something else, but we are moving forward as much as.
There's nothing else that we will be to public hearing. I know it's a little bit early. Don't see any reason for sitting here for a half an hour and let you start.
Because they advertise.
Can we do it?
Hi. You guys actually advertised that the public hearing would be starting at 1 PM. So we'd need to wait till then.
Yeah, and everybody can get quick. Don't make everybody happy. So I do want to just talk about the public hearing for a minute, because we don't typically hold public hearing. For counties that hold voluntary ag district parcels, state statutes, as you know, one of the benefits to being in a VAD is that you get to have a public hearing if there's a condemnation on your parcel that's VAD. That's kind of one of the incentives for landowners to put their property into the VAD program. In October, the general statute changed, and they added in anytime that a property is condemned or rezoned. So Mills River is going through the process. any recommendation they have based on public comments in formal writing to, the plan for the zoning of Mills River. So at 1 o'clock, we'll begin the public hearing. Anyone that wants to speak is able to sign up to speak. Typically, the board decides on how long they can speak. Typically, it's 3 minutes. So once the meeting starts, you can make a consensus and a recommendation for that, and go on how long that would be. Say, I propose this people has 3 minutes. You guys approve that, and then we have a countdown timer for an amount of time to speak. I would also recommend that you may that any speaker can speak on anything related to the agricultural rezoning, because that's the only thing you're making a recommendation on. So you have the other things I want to talk about, but for this purpose, agricultural parcels in Mills River is what we're thinking about today. So that's really, before we start, Kristen will kind of update us on the mics. We're having a little trouble picking up, so we'll make sure we get that all fixed before we start. The board will open in a public session to the meeting, the chair presides, and then we'll go through the list, give everyone their time to speak, okay? So we're not having a conversation, this is the hearing, so we're hearing what they're saying, and then at the end, everyone who's spoken gets to speak, that wants to speak, the board will close the public hearing. And then you'll have time to discuss what you want to recommend after your findings from the public hearing. So this is a little different than a typical VAB public hearing because we're not talking about a specific parcel. We're talking about all the parcels that are in VAB within the town limits that operate under the MOU with Henderson County. So it's a little bit different, but we'll kind of work through it. At that end, then you can set a time, you may either finish the meeting today and come up with your recommendations, or you may choose to meet on another date and publish your recommendations. We do only have 45 days from start to finish, via chapter 45, our ordinance, to kind of get this rolling here, probably. I think we're about 2 or 3 weeks in, so either way, we need to make sure that we have a distinct plan moving forward to close out your recommendations to be sent, on the research. Okay, so I think that's kind of the setup. This is the mics. And cookies, and then you're ready to go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Rintoul. I'm the tax collector for the town of Mills River, but I'm also the liaison from staff to our Ag Advisory Board. You'll see that our mic setup is a little different. We've had to do some experimenting. There's far more people here than we would typically have. So as you noticed, I'm pulling the stand toward me. So pull them a little bit closer and you may to speak into them because right now we are picking up anything on the system really. We do live stream our meetings. So especially with a public hearing, it'd be great to have everyone on record. And for anyone that's in the audience today, when you do your public comment, please make sure you're at the podium to speak into the microphone to make sure everything is documented. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Can you clarify, is this wanting to override the state statute? What is being asked for?
So the state chapter says anytime that a parcel is condemned or now rezoned, a landowner
Down zone.
or down zone can request to have the parcel be, bring it before the board so you make another recommendation and finding. So it doesn't mean your recommendation has to be taken. It usually this occurs in like DOT cases. So DOT comes and they state their case. The landowner comes and they state their case. The ag board finds what they think based on both sides to be true or recommended or best for the county. They write a letter of recommendation and the DOT. This is a little different than we're doing here for rezoning, so it's a little different. But you're just holding a recommendation on the chain for rezoning. So I think it'll make a little bit more sense when Michael gives his presentation at the start, just kind of how they're rezoning things. And then it just kind of holds it off. So like if you have abated parcel, DOT would not be able to condemn it until the agricultural board made a decision. So it's kind of the same thing for rezoning. So they technically can't rezone according to general statute until you guys make a decision.
And just to further clarify, Mike Malachek, and the planning director with the town, so the state changed the law last year, so the town is attempting to abide by the new changes in the law, which really is why we're here, why the letter was sent to the agricultural advisory board. So we are trying to abide by the direction in the state statutes as it was amended last year. And again, because our unified development ordinance includes a town-wide rezoning, that's why we're looking at all bad parcels in Mills River today.
And the state statute says that the owner has to agree to downzoning, correct?
No, the state statute says we have to bring this item to the agricultural advisory boards for the board's review and recommendation. The
But
town of,
downzoning as a whole has to be with the landowner's permission.
the town was the only municipality in the state of North Carolina to get an exemption from the downzoning prohibition. So we are allowed to downzone land as part of this project. But again, today it's really just looking at the VAD parcels and having this board review the proposal and make a recommendation to the town.
That recommendation is gonna come from
Yeah.
County Agricultural Advisory Board or the Mills River Ag Advisory Board.
For the keyboard should say.
Or also be. There'd be two separate.
Yeah, I believe it'd be two separate recommendation letters, but for, time purposes, having a joint hearing today.
That's. First thing we need to do is we need to close our meeting. We're discussing things outside of what.
I heard the close the meeting.
Okay,
Oh, there's.
If you could recess the meeting,
Ag Advisory.
So we can't close it till after the public meeting?
It does say that's.
so what you can do is actually recess and then we'll pick back up.
Because if everything works out, we could make our recommendation to you today. I think, while we're here, I think we need to write in that. Chairman Booty can sign electronically, like the minute about it, about the meeting, this is. With the sign electronically. I think it may have to be coded all the way to the commissioners, but I think we need to I'd like to see us make that recommendation. We discussed it when we redid the.
We didn't discuss it, and there was. I'll have to look and see what we wrote in, because I know during COVID, there was like a different state ruling about how we're using electronic, so I need to go back. But I did bring a copy.
But, we are now in recess.
Pretty good.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, we are here with four, actually five members. Jason does double duty of the Mills River Ag Advisory Committee, and we would like to join you in the public hearing concerning the potential rezoning of voluntary ag district land in the town of Mills River. So appreciate you giving us the opportunity to do this together. Saves everybody a lot of time.
Welcome. So you're gonna give us an over.
So you'll have to enter into public hearing. And so someone will make a motion in second.
Second.
Any opposition? We are now in public hearing.
That'd be fine. Did you want to do public comment first, or? Normally in a public hearing, we do go through public comment, but I don't believe any.
At this time, no one has signed up to speak on the public hearing part of this meeting. If anybody would like to come up, you're welcome to come up to the mic. State your name, your address, and are you in voluntary ag districts or not? This time, would anybody like to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Michael Malachek. I'm the planning director for the town of Mills River. I'll have been with the town 5 years in April of 26. And just to start, I just wanted to read into the record the letter that I drafted to the agricultural advisory boards that was distributed to the board clerks or the staff liaison to the board. So this letter was dated January 6th. And again, reading this into the record just to show that we're meeting the state statutory requirements for this hearing. So the letter dated January 6, 2026, titled Mills River Unified Development Ordinance and Townwide Rezoning Notice Letter to Local Ag Advisory Boards. To whom it may concern, the purpose of this letter is to notify the Henderson County Ag Advisory Board and the Town of Mills River Ag Advisory Committee regarding the Town of Mills River's proposed rezoning associated with the Imagine Mills River Unified Development Ordinance project. The North Carolina General Assembly created a new state law, Session Law 25-12, or House Bill 126, that now requires local governments proposing to rezone farmland in a voluntary agricultural district to notify local agricultural advisory boards and provide an opportunity to review and comment on the rezoning proposal. This law was approved on June 20th, 2025, with an effective date of October 1st, 25, after our UDO project and townwide zoning update was initiated. This project, the Imagine Mills River Unified Development Ordinance project, was initiated by the Mills River Town Council upon execution of the contract with our consultant, CodeWright Planners, on July 11th, 2024, to provide professional services for the new Unified Development Ordinance and townwide zoning update, which does include new zoning districts and a new zoning map for the entire town. The project start was delayed due to a town manager transition and impacts of Hurricane Helene, but the consultant began task one of the project and the townwide zoning update in October 10th of 24, so before the law went into place. According to the new state law, local agricultural advisory boards, and again, this is the language that the state legislature set out for us. The local agricultural advisory board has 45 days to review and comment on the local government's rezoning proposal upon notification of the rezoning of farmland in the VAD program, hence referring to the January 6th date of the letter, because that starts the clock for the 45-day period for the ag boards. Please consider this letter as formal notice of the townwide rezoning that will impact farmland in the VAD program in Mills River and a formal request for feedback from the local ag advisory boards. And then with that letter was a proposed overlay district zoning map and our first draft of the proposed zoning map. And then just recently, we had the second draft of our proposed zoning map was released by the consultants that was shared with staff, I think just a day or two ago. And we'll review all that in detail here. In the letter, I note the UDO will retain the zoning exemption in town limits for bona fide farms. So again, we're one of the few, if not the only municipality in North Carolina that exempts bona fide farms and agriculture with certain qualifiers, most commonly the present use value program. We exempt those operations in our corporate limits and town limits from any zoning requirements, and that is being carried forward in this new code and zoning update. And then in the letter I state, to the best of my knowledge, all parcels in VAD status in Mills River are proposed to be assigned a new agricultural residential or AGR zoning district, except for 3 parcels of land owned by the Hayes Family Trust off Mount Gilead Church Road, and that was due to them being adjacent to an existing residential area with smaller lots. And that's the end of the letter. I will state, and I'll cover this again when I pull up the zoning map, that after receiving some feedback, the agricultural residential zoning district has now been renamed to rural preservation zoning district after feedback from our steering committee and our ag community as well. Any questions just with that overview and the letter to begin with? I'm going to pull up a few things on the screen here. Just to give you an overview of the project. So what's a unified development ordinance? This is basically a new zoning and regulatory land use document that the town's adopting that controls land uses and where they can go, how they can be configured, and all of our development requirements. If you're not familiar with the town, even a little more background, we were incorporated in 2003. And while our zoning and land use regulations have been updated here and there over time, there's never been a comprehensive update. And that's the goal of this project, is to conduct that update. The Unified Development Ordinance is also a tool for implementing our comprehensive land use plan. So the county has a comprehensive land use plan, just like the town of Mills River. And again, the goal of this project is to implement the policy guidance we received from our community that was adopted by our town council, and follow those policies in updating our regulations. Now, as the regulations are being updated, we also are coming up with new zoning districts and a new zoning map. This is a picture of the old zoning map. I'll have another one later on showing our 5 base zoning districts and our 2 overlay zoning districts. Just to touch on the comprehensive plan. So it was the Making Mills River Comprehensive Land Use Plan. It was adopted by town council in spring of 2021. And again, after a year to 2 years of committee meetings, public input, workshops with council, this identified the goals that the community wants to see in regards to the town's future for land use. Again, this plan looking forward to the year 2040. Why are these plans necessary? One, it's a requirement from state statutes that if you have zoning, you have to have a comprehensive land use plan, but it's also to guide future development decisions. And so the plan was used as one of the main policy guiding documents in assigning these new zoning districts and implementing this project. So again, the plan guides land uses, but the project is developing this new unified development ordinance, which is actually the controlling regulation for those uses. They are tightly connected though. So again, the consultant's been working with us since October 24, and they've gone through a couple initial phases of the project. One was identifying project goals, and these reflect a lot of the goals in our comprehensive land use plan. So again, it's protecting the rural and small town character of Mills River. That was the #1 goal identified by our citizens and community members, steering committee members, etc. Implement the town's adopted land use policy. Again, the Making Mills River 2040 land use plan, having a user-friendly code that a normal member of the public can navigate and use, protecting the environment, increasing housing options, promoting high development quality for what we do get in town, and then modernizing land uses. Currently, our code just has sentences of lists of land uses that are allowed, whereas we're moving towards a land use table similar to what the county uses. Just an overview of the schedule. So again, we've been going at this since October of 24. You can see we're right now between task 4 and 5. So we're getting the second half of the initial draft of the code text currently. And then later this spring, we'll be moving into a revised draft that will reflect all public feedback, direction from council, direction from the project steering committee. All those changes will be reflected in a revised draft that will be released to the public in mid-March. And I should plug also, we are having a large-scale public forum for additional community input at Mills River Elementary School on Tuesday, March 10th, for any community members that want to attend, for any agricultural members that want to attend and learn more about the specifics in the code going forward. Also, just going to plug publicly, please visit our project website. This is the one-stop shop for all information, all updates about the project, imaginemillsriver.com. You can submit a public comment. You can sign up for email updates. So anytime a new document or anything is added online, it'll all be through that website. Just some sections of what the code looks like. So again, going from kind of our haphazard zoning code right now to something much more organized and professional, looking and more navigable for the community. And then again, looking at our new zoning districts, and a new use table will be part of that as well. So again, I've hit on this before. As part of this, there will be new zoning districts and a new zoning map, because we're trying to redo the rezoning to reflect what the community wants. Again, preserving that small town rural character. This was an early version of the proposed zoning map, and I'll blow these up for you in a larger scale in a moment. When we did the rezoning, again, it was myself as the planning director, the consultants, and then a mapping specialist, a sub-consultant. We had to have a set of zoning methodology to assign properties, because we want to take, personal decision-making and discretion out of this. We want to use a set standard. And so this kind of goes over that. So if it was a residential property, based on the size, it went into one of these zoning districts. Again, note that the AGR, or Agricultural Residential District, is now called Rural Preservation, or RPV. Again, for an example here, commercial, if it was in a central area of the town, it went to a town center district. And again, we factored parcel size, existing land use into that, and then also looked at our future land use map, part of our town's comprehensive plan, to inform those decisions. Same thing here, if it was mixed use, which is currently our largest zoning district by land area in the town, 3/4 of the town is currently zoned mixed use, which is almost like open zoning. So if it was residential or vacant and over 3 acres, it went to this low density residential agricultural district, now called Rural Preservation. And again, you can see how we assigned the other districts based on parcel size and current use. So that was our approach, was to be, completely objective, assign zoning in the initial maps based on a methodology. And then since then, we've been collecting public input and specific property owners. We're not perfect. We missed something on the ground. Specific property owners can come to us and say, no, actually, this zoning you've applied to my property is incorrect. And so we have already made changes, hence the reason for the second zoning map. And we've actually even come up with a new zoning district for folks that have invested in their property to have a business and a single family home on one piece of property, just to preserve that rural way of life in Mills River. All right, that's the end of the formal presentation. Let me pull up the actual zoning maps here. So this is our existing zoning map. It's a little different colored from the other one we saw. Normally when you're doing zoning maps, you have higher intensity land uses as like a red or orange color. And you usually have residential as a kind of more natural color. So currently our zoning right now has 3/4 of the town in this mixed use district, which again, when people call and ask what it is, I always say it's like open zoning. It has no use table. It just says pretty much everything's allowed except for some very high impact uses that require a special use permit or specific standards. You can see our existing light industrial in purple. Green is MR30, low density residential, and then yellow is a neighborhood commercial district, kind of a transition district between residential areas and commercial areas. And then you can see some of the pink along the highway here. That's our general business or kind of highway business zoning district. So that's what we have right now. Again, the intent with going with the zoning change is that having a zoning district that's wide open that covers 3/4 of the town is not going to be preserving our community character in the future, because while individual property owners like that freedom to do what they want with their property, developers are taking advantage of that as well. So in this project, we're trying to balance that private property rights argument with controlling the development potential of the town to preserve, these large rural areas, again, what the community identified in that land use plan. So here is the proposed zoning map. You can tell it looks a lot different, again, with the same coloring methodology. That green or a natural color is going to be residential. Purple is still going to be industrial. We have this tan district, which is mixed residential, which is meant to kind of take over from the neighborhood commercial. We still have a general business, kind of highway business district. And then I'll have to zoom in, but there's a couple areas of this town center zoning district, around our commercial cores here, just to promote more walkable kind of downtown-ish development. Again, Mills River doesn't have a downtown. We're not trying to create that, but just having a different zoning district that recognizes different types of development that could happen around these commercial cores. The vast majority of the VAD land, as I stated in my letter, is zoned to this dark green district, which is now called rural preservation, formerly agricultural residential. It's going to be the lowest density, lowest intensity residential district. Again, the large change being that the majority of these properties were mixed use or, very wide open zoning with a lot of allowances previously. Any questions at this point?
So changing this from a mixed use to a low density residential, does that hinder someone from having like a personal business, an office on their property? What does it actually change in that verbiage?
Yeah, so you would be allowed to still have home occupations. The one thing we ran up against that resulted in the creation of this new zoning district called rural mix was people that have a home and a business both as principal uses on one property. In zoning, you don't usually see that a lot, but obviously the town only came about in 2003. There was a lot of development, in the unincorporated county before that. And so again, we created that district, which is being requested by folks that have businesses and a house on their property, and they can basically request that and continue to do that in perpetuity. But there are allowances for home occupations, and there are some additional standards for like having an accessory business on your property. But for someone who has a business and has a house on the same property, that rural mixed district was our attempt at a solution for that.
So to piggyback on that,
Yes.
not residential, but say if you have land that is in agricultural use now and you want to expand, you want to build some type of processing facility, something, greenhouse space, something in addition to what you're doing to diversify your farm, how does that play in?
Well, so again, Mills River is unique that we're one of the few towns that exempt agriculture by right, bona fide farms. So again, our main qualifier for that is the present use value program. So if you're on a farm and you're in the PUV program, all we need to do is verify that, and basically you go forth and do your farm work.
You could have indoor farming occurring that did not meet PUV requirements because of acreage.
That's possible, and then you'd have, if you don't qualify for one of the bona fide farm qualifiers, then you would be subject to the zoning ordinance. Now, I don't have all the bona fide farm qualifiers pulled up before me, but in preliminary discussions with our town council, they've already chosen one or two additional to expand that. I believe one of them was even an FSA map. So I know there's different qualifiers for that as well. But if you come in with an FSA map, evidence of PUV of, I think it's the Schedule F tax form, there's a list of documents or qualifiers you can come in. And if you meet that qualification, basically you would get an exemption from us to do what you want. But you are correct, if it's a smaller parcel that doesn't qualify, agricultural uses would be permitted in all these districts.
So it would still be that anywhere in the town you could farm
Yes, ma'am.
regardless of the zone.
Yes, ma'am. And our council's been very clear on that, is that, the intent of this is not to change or hinder agriculture in Mills River. It's to basically, reset the zoning slate and tamp down development potential, so we can avoid, 100+ home subdivisions and commercial development in especially our southern and western parts of town with that more rural nature. But no, council and the steering committee has been very clear that if you're on a single family home lot, even with a house on it, we're not getting in the business of counting chickens or regulating livestock or what you have or what you're growing in your yard. That is all going to be allowed by right. Now, you may not get the exemption that a true bona fide farm would have, but there are going to be allowances for all of that.
So on the flip side of that, if a landowner that is farming has invested money into farmland and that is essentially their retirement and it's time to get out, their land value is going to be less than what they've anticipated, it sounds like.
I mean, I know the county tax office signs tax value based on zoning district assignment. I'm not quite sure how that process works. So I'm not prepared to comment on land valuation. What we typically see with larger developments is that a rezoning is part of that anyway, for those larger, more impactful developments. So, I mean, again, this project would kind of reset the zoning slate. And again, if this is adopted, these would be the new districts, but that doesn't prevent anyone from rezoning in the future, either for a specific project or to prepare a property for sale. There's also one other thing I should mention that I forgot before. So regarding rezoning and requesting other districts besides what's proposed here, there's a couple ways to do that in this process. So right now, if anyone has a problem with the way their property is zoned, reach out to me, go through the imaginemillsriver.com website and submit a comment, and we will basically talk to folks, and we've had many of these meetings, and basically hear their argument for why they feel the property should be something else. What we're not going to get in the business of is using, subjective opinion, because we don't want to inject that into the process as staff. That would be upzoning someone's property for future development. So if they say, well, you're assigning me, this rural preservation district, but I want to sell it, to make sure I can retire, and I want it to be general business. In the zoning side, on the land use plan side, there's not a lot of support for that. So those types of requests may not be considered in the initial phase, but what I'm going to plug is that there's going to be 2 to 3 rounds of a free zoning correction period post-adoption. So we're bound by the state to adopt this by July 1st of this year. If we don't, we lose our zoning exemption. We've basically missed this opportunity to rezone the town. But after adoption, council has already messaged publicly that probably 2 or 3, 4 3-month windows would be open where anyone could come to the town. There would be absolutely no fee, and they could request a different zoning district than, what's been proposed in this map. The theory for that is that if someone does want to upzone their property, again, more allowable uses, higher intensity development being allowed, that needs to happen with the elected officials involved, because staff really shouldn't be involved in that through this project. So there is a window of opportunity for that as well. It would just have to happen with the elected officials. Any other questions about this map? And I can move to the overlay zoning district map.
So basically what I heard you say is if someone shows up with Schedule F, you guys will give them a nod to continue with any ag practices, right?
Yes, sir.
On the FSA.
And a FSA number, which they should have.
Yeah, the FSA map, I believe, was a newer one that council directed us to add just like a month ago.
Maps got your, farm ID number.
I think there was some concern from council that it could take some folks too long to get the tax qualifier. And so I believe that's why they added in the FSA map, because from my understanding, that can turn around a bit quicker.
Oh, yeah.
That's people out.
It has to be Schedule F or some other things, if it's not recognized, FSX, they added that in. More
That's correct.
Property in present use value is also the condition
Exactly.
for
Yes, sir.
bona fide ag.
But
Eh.
you're saying that if you were growing up versus out, that would override if you weren't qualified for PUD?
Say that part again.
If you were doing something indoor where you had the same amount of production, you just
Mhm.
didn't have the same footprint, you're
Mhm.
saying that would override PUD?
We're not looking at like building footprint or production. That's all gonna be looked at by those farm agencies or the tax agencies. So the town is not making decisions based on what's on the property. We're relying on folks to bring in these qualifying documents, whether it be PUV, which we can just look up in county tax records, or Schedule F, or the FSA number or map number.
That's an issue right now with PUD, is if you might be having the same amount of production, but doing it in a different way, so that you don't qualify because of the acreage.
Mm.
And we're trying to do more with less every day, so that's definitely consideration.
Mhm. If that's something the board wants to include, in their recommendation, I mean, that'd be something good to highlight. Because again, we've not thought of everything, so happy to take, any comments into consideration. That's the point of this hearing.
In that situation, you take a smaller track, put a dollar figure on it, where that small track is doing $5,000 or $10,000, then that is a qualified farm. Generate income like that. That was one thing we discussed a couple of times before, and it's, with your high value things like herb, you're doing greenhouse, vegetables, generate a lot of income on a little bit of dirt. You've got market value of the product as maybe a medicinal thing. That's something we can write in our recommendation. It's not written in stone. It's like you said, this is still not written in stone. It's a processing work.
And I'm gonna pull up our, it's the wrong one. I'm gonna pull up our draft, our overlay district map for y'all to look at real quick here. Fine.
While Mike is pulling that up, I've gotten feedback that we're still having trouble hearing you on the video. So if you could pull the microphone closer and speak into it, I would appreciate it.
So this is less impactful because this really keeps consistent what we have now, but this is our draft overlay district map. Currently the town has 3 overlay districts. We have a corridor overlay district with architectural requirements for commercial structures along our major roads. That is not being carried forward. We do water supply watershed permitting within our watershed areas because we have the city of Hendersonville drinking water intake and the city of Asheville drinking water intake on the Mills River. So those are the major districts you see here in red, green, light blue, and dark red. Those are our watershed districts. Per administrative state code, agriculture is exempt from most of those requirements, I think, except for the critical area where there's a 10-foot vegetative buffer. One new one that will be carried forward into this that I should highlight is special flood hazard area or floodplain overlay districts. The town did choose to adopt what's currently called a hazard prevention ordinance for flood prone areas. Last year, in the wake of Hurricane Helene, the town looked closely at regulating our floodplains, which previously had no regulations tied to them whatsoever. So while we didn't adopt rules that met the FEMA minimum requirements for participation in the National Flood Insurance Program, but we do have floodplain regulations in effect now. And so the idea is with this project, we would basically create an overlay district over the floodplains to apply those rules going forward. But again, since we're considering the rezoning of Vadland, this was another one that, again, doesn't change a lot of rules currently in place, but just for y'all's eyes and consideration.
Was there any overlap between the Badland and the new floodplain?
I believe so. For that, I'll have to go, which parcels you're saying?
Well, I don't know what the requirements are. I would like to know what the requirements are.
The way the ordinance is written currently, it's basically just being pulled from what we adopted last year. There's no changes to it, but basically it allows agricultural land maintenance. It's actually a little looser than FEMA, model ordinance regulations where like you'd have to get a floodplain permit for an ag fence or something like that. So our rules don't apply any of that. If you're doing land maintenance, ditch maintenance, irrigation piping, all of that normal agricultural activity is allowed in all of those areas. The only limitation is on fill. So not fill to fill in, not amendments for the field, but actually filling of land for future potential development. So there are strict limitations on that. And then the only other one that council applied was they applied the FEMA standards for having tanks in floodplain areas. So, petroleum products, ag chemicals, etc., just for public safety purposes.
What, buried tanks or surface tanks?
Any. That does not apply to irrigation water pumping systems or water tanks. It's meant specifically for hazardous materials storage in tanks. FEMA has specific requirements about you could bury it and make sure it's flood proofed or waterproofed. You could elevate it, or you could have it ground level, and there's anchoring requirements. But just to prevent escape of those potentially hazardous materials or flotation of the tank during a flood event. But as those regulations were written and adopted by council, again, when they were adopted last year, those are just being transcribed right over. But the overlay district does apply those to the ground. Any other questions on the overlay district map? The last thing I was gonna highlight, and then I'll just I can go into the land use table if you'd like, but I did just pull up the Henderson County GIS with Vadland. Again, not sure how up to date Vadland in the GIS system is, and our current zoning map, just to get a sense for the properties, potentially being impacted. So again, these parcels down here, I believe, went to that rural preservation district. As I stated in my letter, most of these mixed use, kind of open zoning parcels are going from that district to that rural preservation district. Same thing with some of the parcels here in the Mills River floodplain area. So those floodplain overlays would apply there as well, but those are moving from neighborhood commercial to this new rural preservation district. And then I believe it's also the same with all the Mountain Horticultural Research Center land up here. And then these are the couple of parcels, I believe, off Mount Gilead. I think it's these two right here, possibly this one as well, that were not put in the rural preservation district just because of their proximity to developed smaller single family lots. But everything else that is highlighted here that's within town limits, I believe, is moving from whatever their current zoning is. Again, mostly mixed use, some neighborhood commercial, in this case, a couple light industrial, and they would all be moving to this rural preservation district. That's really all I have unless there's more in-depth questions or if you'd like to look at, specific land uses that would be allowed in that zoning district. Also happy to entertain questions. And I should say too, we are working with our local ag advisory board on this too. And again, we're reacting to the new state law requirements. This is really just for the rezoning. We have talked to our ag advisory board chair, who also sits on the project steering committee, that, when we have some of the draft code materials out, they will be looking at those as well.
Like I had, Bill's name on.
So with the 45-day notice, we have till February 20. Is that correct?
I've not calculated, but approximately. Letter went out January 6th.
January. So if we have our Ag Advisory Committee meeting on the 20th of February, that's the last day that we can give that feedback.
If that's the end of the 45-day period, then yes. For a formal recommendation just on the rezoning itself, there can always be further discussion on the code, as we get into the revised drafts later. Yes, sir.
Sir, just for clarification, the agriculture residential zoning, you said the name changed over to,
Rural preservation.
and that was,
We had feedback from some of our agricultural community and from the steering committee that name was confusing. The consultants assigned it because it's used actually in quite a few other towns across the state. But what I heard was there was this confusion that it was going to regulate agriculture because the name was in it. And so we moved away from that. Again, the intent was to kind of have the name to invoke, we're preserving these rural areas of town, but we moved away from that based on feedback.
thank you, clarification.
Yeah.
In this proposed zoning, which characterization allows for multifamily? These multifamily units that come up, but obviously it wouldn't be in the ag districts, but where would that be allowed to be developed?
Sure. So you're correct, it would not be in pretty much most of the green. I believe our steering committee just a week or so ago actually got through, if you look at the light green, that's our low density residential district. And they actually stated they don't even want any multifamily there as well, not even quadplexes. So they might, I think there might be allowances for duplexes, but really multifamily, which we traditionally see as townhomes, would be in this. Let me zoom in here. This mixed residential district in the tan. So anywhere you see that yellow tan color, this might scare you, but this is the legacy development that's already under development, and these are some of our smaller lot subdivisions, Hollowbrook and Glens of Aberdeen. But anywhere there's that kind of tan yellow, multifamily would be permitted. And then also these town center districts, multifamily would be allowed. But that's something our steering committee is still looking at. And I think there's been some discussion about maximum unit counts, because again, while the comprehensive plan talks about having some housing diversity, we're obviously being really sensitive that those types of more diverse living units would be in the core areas of town to preserve that rural character in the outlying areas, especially since there's no public utilities to support that kind of density out there.
So how many bad parcels are in Mills River?
I do not have the total count.
Is there an overlay that, I think you showed it and it just went by too
Yes, ma'am.
quickly, that
Yeah.
shows those 36?
So these,
And on?
yeah, so this is the agricultural overlay from the county GIS map. And so where you see the parcels, with the zoning shading on top, those are the ones that are within Mills River.
So the darker brown, is that what you're saying? The darker-
Yeah, the darker brown, and then that's like the VAD buffer.
Okay, so like that, I'm having trouble seeing it, but
Yeah,
the parcel that's bordering 280. How would that be zoned as with changes,
rural preservation.
even though it's on 280?
Yes, ma'am, because it probably, I can zoom in on it on the proposed maps. Again, we tried to stick to that set zoning methodology, so I lost which one it is, but again, if it was over 3 acres and if it was vacant or if it was residential, it went to that rural preservation, low intensity, low density district. So again, even looking at all those parcels here, and then switching over, again, you can see in that general area, it's all green. I did, I don't have a graphic showing it, but I did go through using the Henderson County GIS map and just compared to our map. And again, based on what I saw, the only ones that are not going to the rural preservation that are in the VAD program are those three off Mount Gilead Church Road.
And you said that was because there was adjacent high density housing?
Just small lot, single family residential was there. And again, that, I'm not wed to that. I mean, that's open for discussion and for recommendation. One of those parcels I do think is a little larger, and maybe we could look at putting that in rural preservation, but I think there was one parcel that was an acre in size right next to a smaller lot, single family, and then another one that was 2 or 3 acres, similar situation. So the consultants applied, I believe it was low density residential to those.
So those were just like expansions on existing.
So they have a bigger parcel that's like 15 acres and they have the two small parcels that are adjacent that have all of that.
I'm happy to zoom in on that for you. So it's going to be this area. If you can see my cursor on Mount Gilead, it's going to be this area right here with that light green. It looks like, yeah, 2 of them went to low density residential, and then this bigger tract that's also in VAD. Again, Hayes Family Trust is the owner, went to rural residential, which is low density residential carries forward our current minimum lot size, which is 30,000 square feet or 0.69 acres. Rural residential is a step down from that. It would be 1.5 acres per dwelling. And then rural preservation, again, being the lowest density, lowest intensity, would be 1 dwelling per 3 acres. But just switching back to the GIS map here. Uh-oh. So again, it's these 2 parcels right here that I believe went to, low density residential. So those would be right here. And then this larger one, again, they may have just put it in a slightly higher intensity residential district. Again, just because of this existing development around it. That one went into rural residential, but again, happy to take recommendations on changes to that.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
We're on. So we go back into session. Because we have got to set a date to have a meeting to discuss when we work out our recommendations for the day. I was looking at February 18th. I know that's 2 days before, but that's a week before our scheduled meeting. We're just gonna move it up 1 week. That gives you a lot of time, and I'm sorry, but it's us, we go on this, and we're gonna have a little more time to look and go on the river. Give you a much better, what I feel like the actually.
And that's fine. These are state imposed deadlines, so doesn't make a difference to me.
I just don't know enough about it right now to sit here and make a recommendation. Whether, have,
Do you know for sure the 20th is the date? You said you.
I counted it out.
Okay, yeah.
We have our
And you-
regular meeting on the 20th, so we will discuss it on that day.
I think, is there a? Second, third. It's the second call, see it later.
With that meeting, will Mills River come to it?
We make the recommendation.
I got you. I got you. I got you too. I remember.
Can I come to your meeting?
Come on, Kirby.
As long as you come to ours.
We don't have, basically, unless we're talking personnel.
Let's see.
Will.
And I would say if the board members want any more information, please visit this project website, imaginemillsriver.com. There's videos introducing the topic, whole bunch of documents, but a lot more background than I can provide.
I didn't have a call.
I'll make a motion, we change the February meeting to the 18th.
I will be there.
Mm.
But I'm not a voting member.
So, David Hill just sent a text and he said he apologized, he planned to be here, he meant to be here. He cannot get out of his drive. So, let's say something about a surveyor.
And he has a really good truck, so
I
it's
know.
gonna be really bad.
He apologizes for not being here. Take the time to comment. But, motion is second, we want to post the. Try to get there, go through this, and we'll get you a letter. Higher. Is there any further business?
Motion to close.
Opposed? Thank y'all for having us.
When we see something that shows us what areas are affected,
Y'all
see something that will show us.
Thank you for,
That's what he tried to show.